Sir Mark Prescott has been at the helm of Heath House Stables in Newmarket since taking over from Jack Waugh in 1969. In part 2 of our visit to the yard, we reflect on his choice of stable jockeys and some star performers that we've seen and enjoyed over the years. There's a great saying that's been put down to you, which I'm hoping is true, defy all the myths again. I think I've looked at many women, but only one jockey.
Yes.
George Duffield. Is that a line that you came out with?
Yes, I think it was true. It was true. And George rode for me for 31 years, and then he retired. And then Seb was understudy, and he rode for us, I think, in total 13 seasons, 7 seasons as first jockey. And Luke Morris is in his second or his third season, I think, now. So I have only had 3 jockeys in 45 years, I think.
Oh, and what was it so much about yourself and George Duffield that cemented that relationship for so long?
I suppose, of course, Duffield started here with Mr. Waugh,
right,
with Jack Waugh. So we'd started in the same pretty hard school. Mr. Waugh was unforgiving, you know, he was a tough man. And so I suppose we'd started together, and George then went off and rode one good season for Mr. Oxley and then had a disaster. And he had a glimpse of the abyss. He saw what can happen to your career. And when I gave him a spare ride one day at Warwick and it won, I think he never again wanted to be in the wilderness. He'd had a glimpse and he didn't want to be there. Of course, he was a ferocious worker and enormously fit. When he moved from Newmarket to Yorkshire, he came in every Tuesday, every Friday, bright, clean, polished, shaved, smacking his whip on his boots. What do I ride? Absolutely as if, and he'd probably been at Redcar night meeting. You know. But he was made of wire and whipcord. He never had to waste. And he could convince himself that a horse with no chance, by the time he got down the start, he thought it could win. And that imparts itself. You know.
And the relationship was excellent for so long. I mean, many marriages don't last that long. To have a working relationship with a jockey that could make a mistake, could not quite carry out the orders that were required, that's quite a big relationship.
And George, of course, although I might have thought he made a mistake once or twice, he never did.
Oh, right, okay.
Never, ever.
Well, that's fine.
He will go to his grave thinking he never rode a bad race. It was always that kid that got in the way or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he enabled him to go on riding for so long, that supreme confidence and fitness, you know. And then Seb, of course, took over and entirely by his own hard work and pulled himself up by his bootlaces to become champion jockey. And now we've got Luke Morris, who's young and fit and determined and can do a lightweight, and you know, he looks like making an excellent jockey all round.
Yeah. Did that give you a lot of pleasure when Seb Sanders was champion?
Oh, it was great. It was absolutely great. And one of the best days racing of my life was, I didn't have a run, it was that afternoon was when he became joint champion with Jamie Spencer at Doncaster. And one thing was certain to win, and it veered off the course and Seb won it, and then Jamie had a steering job, and it was exciting, you know. And of course all Jamie's trainers were supporting him and trying to get him there, and we were doing our best for Seb. It was really the most exciting last day of the season there's ever been, I would say.
And quite fitting that they shared it.
Marvellous. And I remember I think it was the Racing Post, one of the papers said this must never be allowed to happen again. They were both exhausted. I mean, what are you talking about? It was best and most exciting days, end of season we've had for years. You know?
Some of the horses that you've enjoyed here over the years, we've seen statues of them. Albarada would be one of the first that springs to mind for Kirsten Rousing.
Yes, homebred, marvellous family that she's developed. She won the Champion Stakes twice. Only Triptych has done that as a filly. And I think the second win was tremendous because she'd been wrong all year and we hadn't run her for a year. And when she won it, I think the relief as well as the excitement made it a great day. And then there was a half-full sister called Albanova, and nobody but Miss Rousing would have persevered till she was 5. And when she was 5, she won 3 Group 1s. winner trained Miss Rousing, really, because how many people would go on into a fourth season with a mare?
But mares like that and fillies like that early on in their career, they kind of make a trainer, don't they? When you're associated with a horse that keeps coming back and winning more and more, even when they're not supposed to.
Yes, and then we had Hooray for Cheveley Park. She became highest rated 2-year-old filly in the world. So, you know, we were lucky to have her, and she was, only 4 years ago or something. Pivotal, champion sprinter, marvellous sire. I don't suppose I ever thought he was going to be as successful at stud. You know, in a 50-horse stable, you're lucky if one of those comes along every 8 or 10 years, really. You know?
Yeah. And you had Confidential Lady that won a few big races.
She did. She won the French Oaks. Was second to Pam Sly, of all people. Great friend of mine, Pam Sly, in the 2000 Guineas.
Yeah.
She was wonderfully tough filly, always looked tremendously well. She was very easy to train. And probably the most talented we haven't mentioned was Last Second. Won the Nassau for Prince Faisal Salman. And she was very frail, fragile. She needed all your care and attention, and Confidential Lady would whack away and gallop it whenever you wanted, and so they're all different, like you and me.
I remember being in Paris one year for the Arc, and on the Saturday, I think it was Pasternak.
Yeah.
When was massive favourite, and everyone was tipping him up, and he went and won the big race for you on the Saturday before the Cambridgeshire. That was another terrific performance.
And we had the second in the race, Rudimental.
Right.
And Graham Rock was sort of headed the owners who owned Pasternak, and they'd had this enormous bet that as a 4-year-old he'd win the Magnet and the Cambridgeshire, and so he was only ever going to run in those 2 races.
Right.
So when he won the Magnet, of course, all the money poured onto the Cambridgeshire. So he was favourite for the Cambridgeshire, I think, probably before the weights even came out.
He was, yeah.
And just before the Cambridgeshire, we had the big gallop, and Pasternak and Rudimental with a good old lead horse we had called Farmost. And he was well up to winning a listed race, and Pasternak went the best of it. Rudimental was just creeping in behind and was only beaten about a length. So I said to the boys around Pasternak, I'm going to have to run Rudimental, you know, Cheveley Parker. It's just as important to them. They said, I said, well, we've got to run him. Anyway, in the race, it became apparent there was sort of diamond formation, wonderful sunny autumn day, and Pasternak and George Duffield just took it up a little bit soon, and Johnny Lowe rode Rudimental, and he was bright and clever jockey, and he didn't want to help Pasternak by challenging close to him, so he challenged on the stands rail all on his own. And it was apparent that they were going to be first and second, but the order was unknown, you see. And Graham Rock, who famous journalist, as you know, Graham, instead of shouting and screaming or anything, he just tapped me on the shoulder and he said, I do hope you're not going to this up, old man.
During the race?
Yeah, with about 100 yards to go. But Pasternak hung on and won. So we've had some great days. You know, if you're a trainer, you get a few great days, you get a lot of ordinary days. But
that's what it's all about, isn't it? Those great days and the memories. And
stimulating. I always say to young trainers, you know, I don't know whether you'll be a success training, I don't know if you'll enjoy it, but you will be stimulated every day. Now, a lot of the stimuli will be unpleasant, but you will be stimulated.
Now, you say that, and when we were talking this morning before we came on camera, we were saying that you've got a bit of a media aura around you, that you are quite a tough individual and you don't take any nonsense. But today, you've been the most soft-talking, elegant trainer that says thank you to everybody. The guys cutting the grass, thank you very much. The girl riding the horse, thank you. Just totally different from
from what you thought.
Yeah, from what everyone expects. So Mark Prescott, you turn up with shin pads on, sort of thing.
I suppose probably you only need to be as tough as you have to be. So as long as everybody's doing it as they should do, I think there wants to be a big difference between when things are going, everybody's doing what they should do, and if people are not doing what they know they should do, then there should be easily detectable difference.
But there's a lovely aura around the yard, isn't there? It's very quiet, peaceful, relaxed, and your horses really reflect the way that the yard is run.
Well, I don't know if I'm right or not, but I've always believed that the more relaxed they are, the horses, the more they'll eat. The more they'll eat, the more I can gallop them. The more I gallop them, fitter they get, the more they win. So I think they've got to relax. So everything that we do here is designed to try and get the horses to relax so that they can take their work and continue to improve, rather than go off like a firecracker and deteriorate, I think so. And your staff is very important. I think you've got to make them understand their horses and feel for their horses and be careful of their horses. I always say careful's a word people forget what it means. It means full of care. It means not letting him bang himself, not letting him frighten himself, not letting him, do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm pleased with what you say, because what I try and do is make them careful of them.
They really just oozes through that you can see that, yeah. It's been absolutely a terrific scene.
Probably a bit disappointing when I like bullfighting and coursing and to find a string where nobody's allowed to carry a stick and
just explain it. No one carries a stick.
No one carries a stick unless they've got a license to ride, and because I firmly believe that the more settled they are, the better. Therefore, you remove temptation for someone to get cross with one. And if the horse did need strong handling, then there's 4 or 5 people there perfectly capable of riding it, and the rest of them just want to make sure they enjoy their exercise.
So when does the quiet, peaceful, tranquil Sir Mark turn into El Toreador and whiz off to España to enjoy the bullfight?
Well, I go about 4 weekends a year if I can, and the BHA displayed a shocking lack of foresight when they moved the July Cup to the weekend, because it now clashes with Pamplona and Surrey, 2 of the most important events in the bullfighting calendar. I despair of the BHA, really. I'm not taking that into account, but I get about 4 weekends a year, and then I have 1 or 2 greyhounds in training now in Ireland, and I'll get 2 or 3 weekends a year seeing them run as well. So.
I've read quotes about what you said about bullfighting and the way that the bull is treated all its life before it gets into the arena, etc. What is the excitement for you in that kind of sport?
Well, I think bullfighting, of course, if you're an animal man, is endlessly interesting. And there's sort of, if the layman goes to a bullfight and knows nothing about it, he has as much chance of enjoying it as the average Spaniard has walking into Lord's cricket ground and saying, I'll have a day's cricket, if he doesn't know what the rules are. So you've got to understand the rules. You've got to understand that it's reported on the arts page and not the sports page. There's no winner, there's no loser, it's how it's done. So it's cultura, it's on the culture page. And you have to understand that the bull's life is immeasurably better for 4.5 years than it would be anywhere in Britain. And if I could be a bull calf in Hereford or a bull calf in Seville, I'd opt for Seville every time at Coconut, and that the bull is never afraid.
Right.
He always thinks he's winning. The audience, of course, the crowd, they know that he cannot, but as far as he's concerned, so from the point of view of the bull's total welfare, it is enormously better with bullfighting than without it. The same argument, of course, applies to horse racing, where we all know the horse's life is immeasurably better with horse racing than it would be out on the prairies, where if he gets an infected foot, he gets eaten that night.
Yeah.
So the balance with all animal sports is really that, which probably in England we're in danger of losing, that most animals are a working animal and we owe them the best life we can possibly give them. We owe them the greatest care, but they are there to serve a purpose. And the racehorse is to race, and the bull is to go to the corrida, and the cow is to give milk, and once they reach a stage, then that's that. So I think the loss of understanding of the working animal, most people never see a working animal.
No.
And I think that's why people possibly have lost track of how animals think and how they feel.
Some kids don't even know that meat comes from cows, that actually was a live animal.
Yes, that's right. And whereas, my generation, being a country boy, you were brought up on the farm, every animal on that farm, you worked tirelessly to give him the best life you could, but you were going to send him to market. In the end, you were going to kill every animal on that place, but you owed him the best life you can give him. And I think that Ruby Walsh made that very clear after Cheltenham. The horse lives outside. Sure, you do everything for him, but he's not one of the family.
Yeah. You told me some great anecdotes, some great stories from your father and the stepfather today. But what's the best advice do you think you've ever been given by somebody?
My father, when I was dying, I was taken back to school to see him, and he'd seen my brother and sister, and he was downstairs. We couldn't get him upstairs. We would now know he was dying of cancer. Those days they didn't know what was wrong with him. He was just fading away. And he said, "Oh, don't look so miserable." He said, "You know what I've said to you, when it's time to put the dog down when it can't jump up onto its bench. It's time to pull the chicken's neck when it can't fly up onto its perch." And he said, "It's the same with your parents when they can't get upstairs." So, and then he said, "I've thought of a million things I'd like to tell you." And he said, "I just don't feel well enough. So I've written down the only 3 things you need to know for a happy life." And I said, "All right." And I can quote it. Number 1, health, good health. 50% luck and 50% the way you lead your life. Number 2, he said, to find a job you really enjoy, and that takes care of half your waking time. And number 3, he said, is to find someone faintly congenial with which to spend the rest of your waking time. That's all you need to know.
That's a beautiful way out of it. And finally, what's the best piece of advice you've ever given somebody?
Probably the same. Probably the same. I think, again, I borrowed this off my stepfather, was whenever somebody got very high and mighty and holier than thou, was pontificating. My stepfather, who'd been a lawyer, he was part of the Nuremberg trials, and had played a significant part in the Shawcross handling of that. And stepfather used to say, "The moral high ground, Mark, has seldom been occupied by anyone with any qualification to be there whatsoever." So I think whenever you hear someone taking a rather high moral standpoint, I can hear this little voice in the back.
Great stories, great anecdotes. You've been a wonderful host, and thank you very much for spending some time with you today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed having you. Thank you.
Thanks.